Step up to the board, Miss Grant. Or are you already afraid? Harvard. Day 1. The lecture hall buzzed just seconds ago, but now? Dead silence. Every head turned as Professor Henderson's voice cut through the room like a blade. He stood at the front like a general, gray hair sharp as his tone, eyes fixed on the only person not wearing designer clothes or a smug expression. Melissa. She felt the weight of every glance. Curious eyes. Judgmental smirks. One cold stare, the professor's. The board loomed in front of her like a firing squad. Written across it, a monstrous calculus equation, far beyond what should appear on the first day. Integrals within limits within functions. Designed to confuse. To humiliate. A test she wasn't meant to pass. She stood slowly. Her heart pounded in her ears. Was this really happening? No, she told herself. This is your moment. As she walked down the steps, whispers began. She's dead. This is gonna be brutal. Why her? Melissa didn't flinch. She reached the board, picked up the chalk, cold and smooth between her fingers, and stared at the problem. 30 seconds of silence. You could hear someone chewing gum halfway across the room. Henderson leaned against the desk, arms crossed, waiting for her to fold. But instead of panicking, she started to write. And the class froze. The chalk danced across the board with sharp confidence. Not just numbers, but ideas, clear, logical, elegant. She explained her thinking aloud, calmly, as if this was a tutoring session, not a trap. By the time she wrote the final answer, jaws had dropped. Even Henderson didn't move. She turned around. Was that the hardest one? She asked, voice steady. Where did you learn that? The question hung in the air longer than it should have. Professor Henderson wasn't the type to be impressed. And yet, for the first time in years, he looked like he didn't have a script to follow. His brows narrowed, but the corner of his mouth twitched, somewhere between irritation and reluctant intrigue. Melissa didn't flinch. At home, she replied. From who? Books. Mostly. Murmurs erupted across the room. A guy in the second row gave a low whistle. A girl near the window leaned in, eyes wide. This wasn't the story they'd signed up for. Henderson glanced at the board again. Still perfect. He turned back to the class, smoothing down his tie like nothing unusual had happened. That will be all, he said flatly. Take your seat. Melissa didn't wait for permission. She walked back up the steps, head held high. No applause. No high fives. Just 50 stunned students trying to figure out who the hell she was. And then it began. After class, they hovered. At first from a distance. Then closer. You really did that? How'd you figure out step 3? Wait, what's your background again? She didn't answer much. Just smiled, packed her notebook, and slipped out before anyone could trap her into a conversation. But someone followed. You embarrassed him, a voice said behind her in the hallway. Melissa stopped. A tall guy in a Harvard hoodie stood a few feet away. Confident. Athletic. The kind of student who didn't usually notice someone like her. That wasn't the plan, she replied. You made it look like it was. He extended a hand. I'm James. Melissa. You're gonna have a target on your back now. I always do, she said, and walked away. She's not normal. The message sat on James's screen for a moment, unsent. His thumb hovered over the send button, but something stopped him. Was he overreacting? Maybe. But there was something strange about Melissa Grant, not just how she solved the problem, but how easily she fit into the chaos. Like she'd been waiting for that moment her whole life. He finally hit send. Somewhere across campus, the message buzzed on another phone. Meanwhile, Melissa sat alone in the library, tucked into a corner where the sunlight barely reached. In front of her, not math, not textbooks, but an old, worn notebook with scribbles, diagrams, and symbols no average student would recognize. She flipped through it quickly. Page after page of problems more complex than anything taught in undergrad. On one page, a small photograph was taped in. A woman, smiling, lab coat, arms around a young girl. Melissa. Years ago. Her fingers rested on the photo for a moment before she closed the notebook and stared out the window. "You told me to stay quiet," she whispered. "But I'm done hiding." Back in Professor Henderson's office, the mood was unsettled. He stood in front of a filing cabinet, one that rarely got opened, and pulled out a thin, red folder. Melissa Grant. He opened it. Sparse. No elite prep school. No record of formal mathematical competitions. Just a small community college in Nevada. And before that, homeschool. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered. A knock at the door interrupted him. James walked in, hands in his pockets. "You wanted to talk?" Henderson looked up. "How well do you know this girl?" "Not at all," James admitted. "But she's dangerous." "Not in a bad way, in a disrupt the system kind of way." "Exactly," Henderson said, tapping the folder. "And disruptors either rise, or they fall. Hard." A name she hadn't heard in years. Melissa froze as she spotted the words on the screen in the library's archive terminal. She wasn't even looking for it, just scanning the university's internal research database out of habit. But then, like a ghost rising out of code, it appeared. Project Meridian, archived, restricted access. She leaned forward, hard hammering. Click. Access denied. Clearance required. Of course. But she remembered things, back doors, old protocols from the days she spent digging through her mother's encrypted research files. She wasn't just good at calculus. She was fluent in systems. In secrets. Fingers flew across the keyboard. Lines of code appeared. A pause. Then. Override accepted. File open. A loading screen. Then, folders. Dozens of them. And one file that made her stomach twist. Subject 019, M. Grant. 3 floors above, Professor Henderson's office was empty. Except, it wasn't. The flash drive was still there, unnoticed. But the screen on his laptop had come to life. Someone had remotely accessed it. Code scrolled down, fast, precise. Someone, or something, was watching. A red light blinked. User, unauthorized activity detected. Tracking enabled. Melissa clicked the file with trembling hands. And there she was, 8 years old, standing in a lab with electrodes on her head. Her mother behind her, adjusting instruments. Notes in the margin. Subject shows advanced neural pattern recognition. Capable of solving complex multivariable systems intuitively. Untrained genius, potential weapon or asset. Terminated. Officially. She slammed the laptop shut. That last word echoed in her skull, terminated. They thought the project was over. They were wrong. Outside, rain had started to fall. Melissa didn't notice as she walked out of the library into the storm, eyes blank, thoughts racing. Someone had erased her, her history, her records, even her existence in the world of academia. But why? And what would they do, now that she was back? She wasn't supposed to know. Not about the files. Not about the project. Not about what she really was. But now that door was open, and there was no shutting it. Melissa sat in her dorm room, dripping from the rain, laptop in front of her, heartbeat louder than the thunder outside. She'd gone looking for answers. Instead, she found a warning, one written between the lines of her mother's research. If she ever discovers the truth, she won't be safe. There was a knock at the door. Sharp. Too precise. She didn't move. A second knock. Then silence. Then, the handle turned. She launched herself up, grabbing her bag and moving fast. The back window. 5th floor, not ideal. But this was Harvard, not a prison. The ledge was narrow, but she climbed worse. By the time the door opened fully, the room was empty. Only the breeze remained, and a swinging curtain. Across campus. Professor Henderson stood in front of the dean's office window, arms crossed. James sat nearby, watching. "You knew this day would come," the dean said calmly. "She wasn't supposed to return," Henderson muttered. "Meridian ended. We shut it all down after. We buried it," the dean cut in. "Not the same thing. She's smarter than we thought." "No," James said quietly. "She's smarter than any of us thought." The dean turned to him. "You've spoken with her." James nodded. "Twice." "Good. You'll speak with her again." "As what?" "A spy?" "As whatever you need to be," the dean said. "She can be an ally, or a threat. And we don't know which yet." Melissa was already gone. She'd slipped out of the dorm, off campus, into the city. Every part of her was screaming to run, find a bus, a train, disappear again. But something inside said no. No more hiding. No more silence. No more letting others define who she was. She pulled out her notebook. Not the one with class notes, the other one. Full of sketches, equations, systems no one understood. She opened to a blank page. At the top, she wrote, "Plana, burn it down, 10:02 p.m." The observatory sat like a sleeping giant on the edge of campus, empty, locked, forgotten. Perfect. Melissa moved fast and quiet through the tall grass behind the dome. No lights. No cameras. No sound but wind and the distant hum of streetlights. The door creaked open before she even touched it. Someone was waiting. She stepped inside. "Close it." The voice came from the dark. Male. Calm. Young. Melissa hesitated for a split second, then shut the heavy door behind her. A red LED glow flickered on from a laptop across the room. The guy leaned against a telescope base. Hoodie. Messy hair. Wired energy. Eyes like he hadn't slept in days. "You're late. You're vague." He cracked a smile. "Fair." She crossed her arms. "Start talking." He didn't waste time. "My name's Leo. I was subject 014. Meridian. Like you." Silence. Her mouth went dry. No one was supposed to know. No one was supposed to be like her. "They told me I was the last," she said slowly. "They lied." He opened the laptop. Photos. Graphs. Recordings. Surveillance footage of her. From the last few days. From before she even arrived at Harvard. "They've been watching you since you were 14, he said. "They let you in because they wanted to contain you. Not educate you." "Why are you telling me this?" Leo hesitated. His tone shifted, darker now. "Because they tried to erase me too. But I escaped. I've been tracking Meridian ever since. And if we don't stop them now." He turned the screen to her. One final file opened. Project Helix, activation sequence scheduled, 4 days. "What is this?" Leo looked her in the eye. "It's what comes after people like us. The next phase. Not just math and memory. Total control. Neural reprogramming." Melissa's mind raced. If what he was saying was true, she hadn't just stumbled onto an old secret. She tripped over something still alive. Something waiting to wake up. "We can stop it," he said. "But I can't do it without you." They had 5 minutes. Maybe less. Melissa and Leo bolted from the observatory through the back emergency hatch. Alarms hadn't gone off yet, but Leo's drone scanner pulsed red. "They're not trying to stop us," he said, breathless. "They're tracking how we run." "What?" "Behavior modeling. Meridian 2.0. They're testing how far they can push us before we break." Melissa clenched her fists. Her mind went quiet, too quiet. She always got like this under pressure. Her thoughts didn't panic, they calculated. "We don't run," she said. "We reroute." 15 minutes later, they were in the steam tunnels beneath campus. Narrow, boiling, labyrinthine. Leo wiped sweat from his brow. "You know these tunnels?" "Better than anyone." Melissa had mapped them her first week on campus, out of habit. She liked systems. Patterns. Escape routes. She just never thought she'd need them. Behind them, a metallic thud echoed. Something, or someone, had dropped into the tunnels. They weren't alone anymore. Above ground, Henderson stared at the live map on the tablet handed to him by one of the agents in black tactical gear. Dots moved in real time. 2 red ones, Melissa and Leo. A slow-moving blue swarm behind. "She's improvising," Henderson said. "Good. Let's see how far she can go without breaking." The dean stepped forward. "What if she doesn't break?" Henderson smiled thinly. "Then we test what happens when genius fights back." In the tunnels. Melissa stopped in front of a rusted steel door. Chain locked. No key. She didn't hesitate. She took off her backpack, reached inside, and pulled out a screwdriver, a wire cutter, and a magnet. Leo blinked. "You carry that?" "Don't you?" 3 seconds later, click. The chain fell. They burst into an old maintenance room and slammed the door shut. For now, they were safe. Leo dropped to the floor, panting. "Okay, let's pretend we live 5 more minutes." "What's the plan?" Melissa stood, hands on her hips, staring at a faded wall map. Dusty wires. An ancient fuse box. Then her eyes lit up. "We cut the grid." "You're kidding." "They're tracking us through heat signatures and network sensors. We kill the power to this sector, we disappear." Leo blinked. "You're insane." "No," she said, already working, sparks flying. "I'm done playing by their rules." Darkness. Total. Electric. Alive. The grid was down, Melissa made sure of that. But silence didn't mean safety. The tunnels were still humming with something unnatural. A presence. A threat. Leo gripped the flashlight in his hand, its beam weak and flickering. "Whatever suppression mode is. I don't think it likes us." "Good," Melissa whispered, eyes fixed ahead. "Let it come." Because she wasn't running anymore. She was ready to win. Suddenly, metallic footsteps. Fast. Precise. Not human. They turned the corner just as the drone units emerged. Black, spider-like machines with glowing sensors and taser arms, clicking with mechanical hunger. Melissa acted instantly. "Follow my voice." She ducked into a side tunnel and pulled Leo with her. They ran, not randomly, but strategically. Every corner she turned was calculated. Every step led somewhere. And finally, they reached it. A forgotten junction room, filled with old hardware and direct access to Harvard's isolated backup server, one no one had touched in over a decade. "What is this?" Leo asked, breathless. "Our stage." She hooked into the port, fingers moving faster than his eyes could follow. Her notebook lay open beside her, its pages filled with code, formulas, layered logic. She wasn't hacking. She was solving. And then, she uploaded a virus. One built not to destroy, but to reveal. Screens across the university flickered on. Classrooms. Dorms. Offices. Phones. all displaying the same message. Project Meridian, illegal human experimentation. Documents unsealed. You wanted to test me. You failed. MG. Above ground, chaos. The dean's office lights went out. Henderson's phone buzzed with alerts. Students began live streaming. Whispers became roars. It's over, James said quietly, watching the screen. Henderson just stared. Because in that moment, Melissa won. Back underground, the drone stopped. Powered down. Lifeless. Melissa stepped back from the terminal, breathing hard. You did it, Leo said, stunned. She shook her head slowly. No. I started it. She turned to him, a spark in her eyes. They wanted me to be quiet. To be scared. But I'm not hiding anymore. I'm not a project. I'm not a subject. Then what are you? She smiled. I'm the equation they'll never solve. Epilogue. 2 weeks later. National news. Investigations. Resignations. Melissa sits on the steps of Harvard's math building, alone. Or not quite. James approaches, holding 2 coffees. Still anonymous, he asks. For now. You know, they're offering you a scholarship. Full ride. No strings. She takes the coffee. Shrugs. They finally figured out who I am. And who's that? Melissa looks out across the campus, eyes full of fire. The girl who rewrote the rules.